Good afternoon and welcome to the Department of Economics Program for Economic Research virtual live series. I'm Sophia Johnson with the Program for Economic Research, one of the world's leading programs for identifying opportunities and strategies for enhancing economic research. Thanks for being with us today. This event will be live streamed via the Economic Department's YouTube channel. The conversation will be recorded and closed captions will be provided in the days following. By attending, all conference participants agreed to abide by the event's code of conduct, which is posted on our website, econ.columbia.edu/per. As always, the Program for Economic Research in the Department of Economics at Columbia University takes no institutional position on matters of policy. A little housekeeping before we begin. Each presenter will speak for 10 to 12 minutes. In this case, we have a keynote speaker. The presenter has agreed to take all your questions live or in the chat at the end of his presentation. And you may unmute yourself and ask the question or simply type your question in the chat box. If you're joining us on the live stream, the live YouTube feed, you can post your questions. You can also add them on social media, and we will incorporate that into today's discussion. Lauren Close, the program manager here at PER, is joining us as well. She will be adding updates on social media as well as monitoring and posting comments in the chat box during our conversation today. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For this event, we're using the hashtag #PerLiveSeries. So, artificial intelligence, the implications for business strategy. We start this hour defining the many different entry points for AI in the global economy and exploring how far we have come on the path toward achieving this vision of future productivity through AI and the ways organizations can improve their odds of success. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Chengkai Li, professor and associate chair in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Texas at Arlington. Dr. Talia Plemetes of Wayfair will not be joining us today. Dr. Li is the director of the Innovative Data Intelligence Research Lab at UT Arlington, where the focus is on building impactful interdisciplinary research in several areas related to big data intelligence and data science. His research interests include data management, data mining, natural language processing, machine learning, and their implications in computational journalism. Dr. Li pioneered the field of computational fact-checking and has produced a significant body of research on topics related to knowledge graphs. He has also led a 20-organization and multidisciplinary team of researchers and partners from academia, government, and industry to conduct NSF Convergence Accelerator projects on credible open knowledge network, which really aims to ensure the credibility of decision-making software powered by knowledge graphs. Professor Li, welcome to the Econ Live series. Now to begin, research on the economics of artificial intelligence almost exclusively focuses on the potentially transformative economic purposes of AI, this thesis that it may significantly lower the cost of prediction. However, only 10% of companies buy the story that they can obtain significant financial benefits from artificial intelligence technologies. Why so few?
Oh, hi, Sophia. So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's my honor and a great pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you all. So how does this go? Should I address your question first, or I
Sure,
should present?
Sure, you can certainly start with the question why there's so few, and then move right into your discussion if that
Sure,
works.
sure. I think the term artificial intelligence, of course, nowadays it is a focal point of our conversation in the society. Everyone is excited about it. Everyone is talking about it, and this term can refer to very broad subjects and themes. It can pretty much refer to everything related to computer science. But in narrower sense, what makes people most excited about, artificial intelligence is really the development of and the advancement of machine learning, deep learning, technologies and their applications in the past about 10 years, and really breakthroughs there. So, I think there are several reasons. Artificial intelligence is nothing new at all, right? It actually started as a discipline 50, actually longer than that, 70 years ago, pretty much at the same time when computer science started to form as a discipline. And for a long time, people really didn't make important breakthrough, but it started to take off really quickly in recent years for multiple reasons. One is that nowadays we have data everywhere. Our capacity of generating data and collecting data and analyzing data is much greater than before. And so that's number one, because data is everywhere. And number two, it's because of the advancement of computing infrastructure and hardware, including CPU, GPU, larger memory and storage, cloud computing technologies, and so on. And then number three, of course, there were algorithmic advancement from computer science, deep learning particularly. So it's natural that every business feels the urgency of adopting AI and to be prepared for impact created by AI advancement. And so I do not have firsthand experience with regard to the statistics you mentioned, 10% or 15%. I'm pretty sure those of you in the audience know that number, in deeper sense than I do. But my guess is that, there could be multiple reasons. Number one is it really requires resources and the talent in order to tap into the capacity of artificial intelligence, right? And there's also needs to be a realistic need. If you are a small, say, personal business and you don't really have large amount of data from which you can gain insights, then the chances are there's less you can leverage by using artificial intelligence. And you do not really have the resources to carry out whatever insights or decisions you can make based on artificial intelligence. Yeah, but I think for corporates and large businesses, it's not really, a desire. It's really a must to have investment in AI technologies in order to stay cutting edge and competitive in their businesses. I hope to some extent that addresses your question.
Thank you. So I'll turn the floor over to you now to begin your presentation, and we'll take questions at the end.
Cool. So I prepared some slides to basically summarize some of the projects that I've been doing in the past, say, decade. I understand this is a very brief presentation, so I will not go into technical details. So you may hear quite some jargons, so bear me with that.
Yeah.
And I understand that there was originally there was another panelist. They couldn't participate today. So in theory, I may have a little more time. So yes. I'll indulge myself to go beyond the originally assigned 10 minutes to me. And I have a few slides. And after that, I can share a video with you about a project that I recently worked on.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure. Let me share the slides with you. Just one moment. All right. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, perfectly.
Right. So a lot of the focus that my research group has in our research is on misinformation and fake news, and more specifically, developing computing tools to help fact checkers and reporters and the public in tackling misinformation. And I don't need to explain what is misinformation and fake news. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of it. And this has become a increasingly important challenge to our society, right? And here are just some statistics, and to just remind you about the impact misinformation has on our society and economy as well, right? Um, And if you're not familiar with what people are doing in tackling misinformation, I just want to mention a few organizations, the fact checkers, Washington Post, PolitiFact, New York Times and factcheck.org and so on. There are many more. So they are working diligently in basically vetting factual claims made by people and organizations and inform the public about the truthfulness of those factual claims. However, they are not able to keep up with the large amount of information that is spreading online. For instance, we have learned that typically a fact checker will need to spend between several hours and a day or even longer to really investigate a piece of misinformation and then write about it and publish it. And so, you can compare this with the huge number of, information online, including a large portion of the social media posts on Twitter and so on that that are spreading misinformation, right? So that's a huge challenge, in terms of scale for fact checkers to deal with. And here's just a more concrete example to explain why fact checking is something that is not trivial and takes time, right? Of course, I'm only using this as an example that's available from PolitiFact. There is no personal or political stance here. This is a factual claim made by Mitt Romney a few years ago. He said our Navy is smaller than it's been since 1917. So it seems that he was referring to statistics about number of battleships in the United States Navy since its creation in 1916. So if you look at the numbers, indeed, the number of battleships in 2009 or in 2012, that was when the claim was made. The number of battleships at that time was close to historical low, right? So in that sense, if you literally interpret this chart and his claim, you would say his claim is largely true. However, his claim was rated by this fact-checking website called PolitiFact, rated by PolitiFact as pants on fire. And the reason is the claim essentially was comparing the battleships 100 years ago with the modern aircraft carriers, right? And so you cannot just look at the number of battleships in measuring the strength of Navy. So this is an example that demonstrates the subtleness and complexity in fact checking. Oftentimes, it's not about looking up data from somewhere and vet whether it checks out. And you actually need to have deeper understanding of the context of it. Yeah. So we have been working on this project called Claim Buster for the last 7 or 8 years. And our goal is to automate the process of fact checking. And we say this is toward the holy grail of automated fact checking. And this is just to say that this problem itself is to some extent overwhelming and daunting, right? And we are not really close to a truly automated, fact checking system that can tell you immediately whether something is true or false. I mean, we can do that to a very limited extent on certain types of claims, but largely this is an example where artificial intelligence system and human workers need to collaborate together in order to achieve certain goals. But nevertheless, we have made progress in some of the directions where automation is more possible and more effective. And particularly, we looked at how we may help fact checkers in deciding what to fact check. So we call this problem the claim spotting problem. So this is a screenshot of a file that PolitiFact called Buffet of Factual Claims. Basically, they had interns collecting factual claims made by people and appear on various, TV programs, news outlets, and so on. And then they highlight those factual claims, and then they decide which ones to further investigate. So our tool aims to develop a machine learning algorithm that is able to rank factual claims, and so that fact checkers can look at that ranked list and focus on top ranked factual claims, because the top ranked ones are more likely to be the ones that deserve their attention, and they have limited bandwidth, and so it's really important for them to be selective in focusing on what to fact check. So, this might be the most technical slide in my presentation, so I hope that's acceptable. So this is a fairly typical supervised learning task. So basically, we looked at transcripts from all the past general election presidential debates, and then we look at all the sentences. We use human experts to annotate those sentences in terms of whether a sentence is a factual claim that is worth checking or not. So by doing that, we annotated 23,000 sentences, and that's the collection of ground truths that we have. And so we have various machine learning models learn from this ground truths. And then this is our claim buster claim spotting model. Now, you can apply this model on a live event or apply that on a web page or news article. And then this model will be able to rank sentences in that piece of text and recommend sentences that are recommend factual claims that are worth checking to the fact checkers. Yeah. So for instance, I'll talk about that later. Just a little, slide to give you examples of, what are factual claims that are important and worth checking. So, for instance, I was in Iowa yesterday. This is factual claim, but most likely this is something that is not important or worth checking. I ate a burger yesterday, and so on. And there are statements that are not factual claims. They could be opinions or questions and so on, right? Something like, I will be tough on crime. And that's really a pledge, but that's not a factual claim. Or 7% of unemployment is too high. And that's an opinion, that's not a factual claim. And on the other hand, the top 3 sentences in this slide, these are considered important factual claims by our human annotators. So the machine learning algorithms look at these annotated sentences and figure out the signals from these sentences and then build a model so that when the model is applied on future sentences, it can make a prediction with regard to whether that sentence should be fact-checked or not. So we have built a public API Basically, this is a code base where programmers can tap into. They build their fact-checking programs that can call our API. If they have a statement, they can call our API, and our API will tell their program whether that statement is worth checking or not. So they can use this for various purposes. And our code base is also publicly available, and we welcome people to work together with us in developing this and contributing to this. So if you go to our project website, you will find more details. This is just to show pictures that I took, I think 6 years ago, when we worked on using this tool to fact check presidential debates. This was in 2016. We have some device connected to our TV, and we take closed captions from the device and then run claim buster models on the closed caption. And then claim buster will figure out what sentences are worth checking. And so you can imagine fact checkers can look into this and decide what to fact check at that moment. And we have been applying claim buster on all past presidential debates. You can find the details about this on our project website. This has been used by fact checkers. There's a news article from Washington Post about how they pick up a lead recommended by claim buster. So, the fact checker said it would have been lost to history if it had not been for claim buster. And so this is a screenshot of a newsletter or alert email that is produced by Duke Reporters Lab. They apply claim buster on transcripts of TV programs, social media, and even congressional records. And then they find those highly important factual claims, and then they compile those claims and send those to fact checkers. And so to some extent, you see this is a match of the PolitiFact buffet that I showed earlier. And this shows that claim buster to some extent can be used to do the work that the intern was doing, for PolitiFact. We are also using claim buster to monitor factual claims people made on social media, particularly in Twitter. So if you go to this project website, you will find the factual claims made by all major politicians, House representatives, senators, presidents, and so on. And you can look at the claims they made. You can look at the scores that claim buster gave on their claims in terms of whether they are worth checking or not. There are some other tools. For instance, there's a browser plugin that can flag health misinformation related to COVID-19 and so on. We also build a dashboard for tracking COVID-related misinformation. So if you click at one place, it will show tweets from the government officials, but it will also show what kind of factual statements and misinformation has been spread by people from that area. Yeah, well, I have some more slides that I can use maybe in responding to some of your questions. But I'll stop the running of the slides at this moment. Do we still have time for showing that video, Sophia?
Sure, we certainly have time for the video, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about the economic, the reaches of the work you're doing in the economic space,
Sure.
Hypothetically, and then we could open it up for questions.
Sure. So let me share that video with you.
KN is a project in the National Science Foundation Credible Open Knowledge Network, COKN, is a project in the National Science Foundation's Convergence Accelerator program. Good data enables good decisions. The open knowledge networks created by the Convergence Accelerator projects are a public knowledge infrastructure that will but will the networks be vulnerable to inaccurate information? This is a real concern, as evidenced by many poor and disastrous decisions caused by bad data and misinformation. COKN is a suite of frameworks and tools. It helps software developers and domain experts build credible decision-making software powered by open knowledge networks. Let's consider an important use case: vaccine misinformation. Exposure to misinformation made many parents delay or refuse vaccines for their children. This led to completely preventable disease outbreaks, such as a measles resurgence. 1 in 10 infants were unvaccinated in 2016. Vaccine hesitancy is a top 10 threat to global health. Today, parents are given brochures called vaccine information statements from the CDC. These brochures are accurate, but in practice, they help very little. They often do not address the parent's specific concerns. A parent may be worried about autism, but the brochure doesn't even mention it. Its language and style may be unappealing or confusing. And for folks that don't trust the government, a statement from the CDC often won't help. So what should we do? Our insight is that the brochure must be contextualized for it to have a better chance of being perceived as relevant or credible. We are building an app to help healthcare workers. Imagine you are a nurse speaking with a hesitant parent. Quickly, you can enter the parent's concerns. You'll get back the key points you can make. Based on the parent's electronic medical records, the app will recommend contextualized interventions. For example, if a parent is worried about autism and doesn't trust mainstream media, the app could recommend a video featuring a pro-vaccine mother of a child with autism. But if a parent has read specific research connecting vaccines and autism, the app would suggest articles exposing bad research and retracted publications. For a second application, consider cybersecurity and how software and hardware vulnerabilities are currently addressed. The standard practice is to examine a ranked list of vulnerabilities reported by various sources. Given limited resources, the analyst within an organization would fix top-ranked vulnerabilities first, but the risk scores ignore the organization's particular context. For instance, a vulnerability may pose high risk because attackers can exploit it over the internet. But in a power grid, a device with this vulnerability may not even be connected online. Without this context, poor choices can lead to severe financial and even human loss, such as an unnecessary shutdown of a power grid. To solve the problem, we are building a tool to identify and explain credible threats based on each system deployment profile. The COKN framework and tools draw insights from these applications. They will be important across domains. Software developers and domain experts will use COKN to improve objective credibility, which is about fact accuracy. The tools will help fix bad data and explain query and analytics results. But credibility is more than data accuracy. COKN also helps developers improve the subjective credibility of their software because user perceptions are critical to making information convincing. The framework includes strategies to contextualize results from queries and analytics to match decision makers' needs and profiles. COKN captures not only facts but also inaccuracies, and it models user profiles. It uses taxonomies to semantically connect the knowledge graphs and user profiles to achieve contextualization. We've already developed some taxonomies and knowledge graphs for vaccine misinformation and security vulnerabilities. Our interdisciplinary team includes computer scientists, social scientists, and application domain experts from academia, industry, and government. To create real-world impact, we'll work with our partners and other teams to apply, test, and deploy our technologies. Credibility is key to sustaining open knowledge networks and thus empowering the American people. Without COKN, we risk going back to square one. with low quality data and poor insights to drive decisions.
This is great. Thank you. So tell us, Professor Li, thank you so much for your presentation and your contribution and your insights into really this remarkable space. Claim Buster, I feel like somewhere in the future, this might be something that we can all download on our computer, for example, for use at home, at school. And so it really is a testament to sort of where we are going with the global economy. I wanted to talk a little bit about speak to the questions, because the questions started coming in on social media. It seems we have a lot of economists in the space. What part of the business would benefit most from applying some of the work that you're doing? What is it? Are we talking about the supply chain, the logistics, the financial sector? How should students think about a collaboration in this space? Like, what should that relationship look like?
That's a very good question. I guess there are multiple questions, so let me try to address some of these. So, in terms of the research that I've been working on, and what this project COKN and as well as Claim Buster is about, pretty much you can say that misinformation now is everywhere in every business sector. And I don't know if you were able to see clearly the several examples in one of the frame in that video, in which we can see examples of misinformation across everywhere. So it's well, just one moment. So I'm finding that slide, so I can refer to that.
Sure.
There's misinformation related to vaccination. There's misinformation related to misleading map. There's misinformation about rumors with regard to particular products. Misinformation in data about safety of highway bridges and so on, right? And I just stumbled upon a article about I don't know if you have heard of this Dasani, this bottled water.
Yeah.
From Coca-Cola. They donated a large number of bottles to Waco, Texas, and you all probably have heard of the ordeal we went through last week. So this is a good act, right? With good intention, but surprisingly, it was not received well, and it became even a public relation crisis. So this is an example that can show, and part of it, I think, has something to do with misinformation. People, claiming, strange flavor of the water and so on.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so really this impact every business sector and every corner of our life. Another example I would like to refer to is GameStop. You may have heard of the strange stock price increase by maybe 10 times just in this year of GameStop, because of investors all self-organize themselves through social media and to act against Wall Street. And so I heard that there's misinformation there spreading in the Reddit channel of how do they call themselves, Wall Street bets. That's the Reddit forum where the investors are organized. So I don't know if this directly corresponds to the question you asked at the beginning. And if you could remind me, or I would be happy to go further.
Well, I think that the students want to, I think what we're hearing is that, well, how can, one, what can businesses do? And two, as I'm thinking about my post academia experience, what can I do to ready myself, or what area of business might I consider, what are the openings for the next generation of scholars sort of going into considering work in the private sector? How can they help to find the types of solutions that you're working on? And two, what are businesses doing about these challenges? What has been the response to businesses? Are they reaching out to collaborate with you? What are some of the hypothetical solutions here to the problems that we're seeing and the impact it's having on markets, for example, for businesses?
Right. So with regard to my own project, we have been collaborating with Duke Reporters Lab. Through them, we get connected to the fact-checking community. So the impact there so far is still largely on journalistic organizations, in the sense that we have tools that can help fact checkers in doing their work, and mostly their work focus on political fact checking. It's about vetting whether something said by a politician is true or false, right? So it's less directly related to you know private businesses and so on, but it does have it's indeed highly related to some of the well-known examples of misinformation that impact our life. One is this vaccination related misinformation, and you can extend that to COVID related misinformation as well. So for these, we're just working with the fact checkers at this moment, not really with private sectors yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the point is that misinformation is a very broad concept. It goes beyond political fact checking.
Sure.
And there are all types of misinformation that is there. And in that video, we have provided an example where a cybersecurity business will need a technologies in tackling misinformation.
Right. Very good. I would like to open up the panel to questions from our viewers online watching and joining us on YouTube, but also participants on Zoom. You may type your question in the chat box, and also you can also unmute yourself and reveal your video, and then we could take your questions one by one from Professor Li. A question here, good evening. My question would be, how has the system been back tested or vetted so that we know that the issues, questions to fact check are indeed the most relevant ones? Professor Li?
Yeah, I was actually hoping to include in this presentation a chart that shows the correlation between claim buster scores and the factual claims indeed vetted by professional fact checkers. So basically, we looked at things that the fact checkers decided to work on, and the scores received by these statements, and we find a strong correlation. Show that to you.
Okay.
This is in a paper, research paper that we recently submitted. So just bear with me for a moment. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the way we make sure that the tool is producing sensible and effective results is by collecting feedback from our partners at Duke Reporters Lab, and from then the fact checker community. So that's one approach. And the other approach is what I said. We conducted the investigation to see correlation between our tool and what fact checkers decided to work on. And then, of course, we are seeing more and more people started to using our API. They sign up to get a access token in order to use our API. So we are getting more and more people requesting that token, and some of them even contributed to our code base. So so now I have the paper. Let me show that chart to you.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is a paper that we recently submitted. Let me enlarge it. Yeah, so if you see this chart and the distribution here to the left-hand side, the blue one, this is the distribution of scores that Claimbuster gave to those sentences that are not chosen by fact checkers to fact check, right? So we are looking at, let's say, all the sentences from a speech by a politician. That's a State of the Union speech by the president. So Claimbuster gave each sentence in that speech a score, and some of those sentences were fact checked by a fact checker, some were not. So the blue distribution, the distribution of Claimbuster scores on those sentences not fact checked. And then these other three distributions in orange, green, and well, what's the name? Brown color. So these are the distributions of Claimbuster scores on sentences by PolitiFact, Washington Post, and New York Times. So you can clearly see, the separation between these two distributions. That shows that Claimbuster is able to separate sentences that are worth checking from those that are not worth checking. So keep in mind that not everything in this blue distribution is not worth checking. It could be that they should be fact checked, but fact checker, they do not have resources to fact check everything. Yeah.
Thanks for your response, Professor Li, and thank you for your question, Eric. We have another question coming in from Liz. And this question, Liz Johnson wants to know, how does your fact checker differ from Twitter's fact checker that was introduced during the 2020 presidential campaign?
Right. So Twitter, of course, they work with the International Fact-Checking Network and other organizations, and they largely rely on human monitors to decide on whether a account is spreading harmful and untruthful information. Of course, they may have proprietary tools or algorithms that we are not aware, or the details are not made public. So they could have tools similar to ours to flag, let's say, tweets that have factual claims or even factual claims that could be controversial. Yeah. So that's an area where potentially, an organization such as Twitter can apply a tool like Claimbuster. So in fact, if you remember, I showed a screenshot of our own internal project called Claim Portal. And the goal of Claim Portal is to use Claimbuster to monitor and highlight factual claims made by politicians in Twitter.
Thank you. Also, any plans to go further to directly match the statements to machine learning driven systems which process them and present a conclusion as to their veracity?
That's a very good question. So we actually had some preliminary effort in this direction. Overall, this is a much harder problem than flagging, important factual claims. So vetting the truthfulness of a claim is much harder than spotting an important factual claim. So, there are several directions one can take. So, you can think about data that could be available, from various resources, including the knowledge graphs I mentioned, things like, say, information from IMDb, from Wikipedia, from data.gov, all these census, economics related statistics. You have all those data. You also have non-numeric data, such as, statements made by people or comments made by people. And, when you are looking at a factual claim, you can figure out, try to understand that claim and then figure out how you decompose it and then leverage these various data sources, to understand whether it's true or false. And of course, this is much harder. We had a preliminary tool that can, handle basic factual claims. So, if someone says the capital city of Texas is Dallas, and that's relatively easy to figure out that that's not true, right? But if it is something like the U.S. Navy is the weakest since 1912, and as I explained at the beginning, and even if the data checks out, you may make the wrong conclusion, or you will make the conclusion that is different from what the fact checkers will say. They may say it's actually pens on fire. That requires a subtle understanding. It's very complex.
Thank you. We have 3 questions coming in on social media. I'm also keeping an eye on the time. First question for you, Professor Li. Do you think businesses will continue to adopt AI at a rapid pace? What barriers might there be to adopting AI?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think there's no doubt that businesses will continue to adopt AI. And, these big corporates, like I mentioned, they really have large amount of data, large number of partners and customers, and they can leverage AI in looking into the data for many, many different purposes. And I'm pretty sure you have encountered the stories about this, right? Amazon using recommendation systems to figure out what customers may like to buy. Netflix can recommend videos to you. Even the pandemic creates opportunities. You may heard of AT&T, Google working on tracking people's movement to stop spreading of virus and so on. So there's to me there's no doubt that there will be still large amount of investment and development in this arena, and oftentimes it's not a choice. Even if you don't do anything, you need to be prepared for challenges related to this. The examples I gave related to GameStop and Dasani, right? So for instance, a company, they may need to have a capacity to monitor social media to understand the public opinions about their products and their brand, whether it's positive or negative, and whether there is misinformation, rumors spreading about their brand online. And if they can, spot that earlier, they can take actions earlier to counteract.
Sure. Yeah, I think we certainly talked a little bit about that. I think, the impetus is on companies to sort of stay ahead of the social media posts, right? And to be proactive in how they engage with what's happening in the social media space, positive and negative. That's a good point. What are some of the current trends in AI that you are really excited about? That's a question coming in from social media.
Yeah. Well, I think all these questions are great, and this reminds me, the last question. There was also the second component about obstacles or limitations, right? Sure. So let me answer both together. Maybe about the pitfalls or challenges first, and I believe many of you have heard of pitfalls related to bias and so on. one example I can use related to, again, my own research projects. If you think about what to recommend to the fact checkers, there could be bias if you are not careful in building our data model, building our machine learning model. The bias can, come from various different sources, including the bias of the human annotators when they annotate a sentence in deciding what's important to fact check.
Mm-hmm.
It's also related to the conversations, the political discourse that people have online. What appears more often, what appears less frequently. So we had some preliminary experiments that shows, claim spotting model, if not carefully designed, it could be vulnerable to bias as well. One example is we have two factual claims which are otherwise identical. They only differ by reference to two different, ethnic groups. One may say the Black community, the other may say Hispanic community, and they are rather identical, the rest of the two sentences. And the model could potentially give one sentence high score and the other sentence low score, and suggest a very different worseness of checking. And that may, if you totally rely on automated tool for deciding on what to fact check, then you may kind of focus on fact checking things particularly related to one community, but ignoring the other community.
Yeah, good point. We have one final question. I think we have time for one more question. What are some things people transitioning from jobs in academia to private industry should know? What in particular should PhDs and MAs and postdocs in AI data science know, thinking ahead on the future global economy? What are your suggestions? What are your predictions? What are you encouraging our students to do?
So, these are all fascinating questions and very big ones. I'm not any authority, so let me just provide my opinion. So data science by nature is an interdisciplinary discipline. So it's supposed to be that, everyone, regardless of your background, you need to have various level of data. They call it the data acumen. The capability of, wrestling with data, analyzing data, gaining insights from data, and, making decisions based on that, being able to recognize the potential pitfalls of those decisions, such as bias, and being able to even interpret machine learning and AI algorithm results, being able to communicate. In data science, it's also important that you have a way of describing the results in a story, in the context. Keep in mind, if you are a data worker, you need to communicate data science-based decisions to decision makers, to your boss, and that communication is very important as well. So my sense is that this is really an important skill that everyone should have. If you're not, let's say, if you're not a computer science student, you don't necessarily need to be a machine learning guru, know the mathematics behind it. But you need to know the basics. You need to know what tools are available there. And nowadays there are a lot of open source tools, tutorials online, and they are made really accessible to everyone with basic college level education. And you can build very useful tools quickly, really, by following some of these tutorials online. So data science or AI, I think it's exciting and it's accessible to everyone, and it's something that cannot be dodged by anyone.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Program for Economic Research and the Department of Economics at Columbia University, thank you, Professor Li, for joining us this week. The conversation will continue online. This video will be posted in the next day or so. You can follow our keynote speaker, Professor Li, on Twitter at Chengkai_Li. You can also follow Columbia Economics on social media at Columbia_econ. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you for attending. We encourage you to visit our website, www.econ.columbia.edu, for more information about our upcoming public events. Thank you, Professor Li.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Take care.